We were talking about how this could be a whole lot of nothing here today when it comes to the market impact, but what are you expecting here? Is there a chance of an off-ramp, or are tariffs going up today?
Well, tariffs may go up today. We know predicting this is going to be very difficult, but deadlines are flexible. But even if they do, as Steve Engel just said, they won't have an immediate impact. But at the same time, they've got another day of negotiation. They may not settle everything, but I think it's pointing toward an agreement at some point, and maybe between the two presidents. It may go to that level.
But I'm just wondering how, we're getting really close to 2020 now, and how that actually impacts President Trump's thinking, because if he comes up with some kind of deal that's meaningless or not meaningful, you're going to have at least 20 Democratic candidates out there that's going to say, look, Trump says he has the art of the deal, but he didn't go hard on China. Does that give him more reason to maintain this hardball stance? I
think so. And the way he reacted was that the comeback from China was basically taking away some of the things that at least the U.S. claims they agreed to. And these were exactly in those issues on how you decide whether they actually did what they were supposed to do or not. Enforcement is the key, and other areas on technology transfer and so on. Because, it's superficially about trade, substantially it's about IT, but really it's about global leadership, including in IP. And China now has a stake in that because they're moving forward in areas like technology and moving toward world standard. And as countries do that, they're more interested in protection as well, but on their terms, of course.
Mark, I was speaking to a former senior U.S. official a few weeks ago who said that the mood in D.C. was very hawkish across the spectrum, the Democrats and Republicans, but also, of course, in the national security apparatus. How ingrained do you think that is? And is there anything that is going to shift that, do you think? Bipartisan, yes.
Yeah, I think it's pretty strong. It's actually the Democrats that used to lead that, not all Democrats. But I come from a district in west central Illinois that was Republican since Lincoln, actually, until about 15 years ago, when a Democrat won the congressional seat based on anti-trade. And that's the feeling. The feeling is that, we've lost jobs, especially those that are in manufacturing, and all went to China. A lot of it didn't, actually. In fact, much of it didn't, but that doesn't matter. And that's a feeling that I think is felt throughout the country. So it's going to be, I think, an issue in the 2020 campaign, no matter what happens. But it'll be easier for the administration, but certainly there'll be a target of criticism from most Democratic candidates.
What would your advice be, the practical steps that businesses can take in light of these trade tensions to plan for the long term?
Well, they've already taken them to some extent because there was some anticipation of problems going forward. So, for example, many of them have tried to shift supply chains or alter them. Some haven't actually been able to. At the same time, they're having issues that they have to deal with. Many of them send their staff to the U.S., to Europe, wherever it happens to be, especially the U.S. They work with them for training, for meeting some of their colleagues and so on. That's harder to do now. Approvals, which used to take a few days, now take much longer. And people are being kept out of the United States. So it's hitting in a lot of different areas. So if this is even a truce, it will probably help in those areas. And I'm sure you'll see it in the markets and others.
Yeah, I was speaking to Stephen Olson from the Heinrich Foundation just a couple of days ago, and he mentioned a very interesting point, that if the enforcement mechanism for the U.S. is now for these regular checkups on China, this kind of snapback mechanism when it comes to tariffs, how does a CEO actually make formidable business decisions, given how fluid this situation can be? Does this only extend the uncertainty?
Well, that's the problem. And it's not just the tariffs. It's also other parts of the negotiations, SOEs, state-owned enterprises. They're competing with international firms now, and they have pricing structures that are far different than international firms. And some of them, even if they were market leaders, are starting to pull away from China. So, it's really having an impact, and it's good that the negotiations are focusing on this from the view of firms. And you've seen that change in the U.S. It used to be driven by politicians. Mm-hmm. It's now driven in part by the corporate side. They may not always like the tariff approach, but they do like pressing on areas like IP and state-owned enterprises and so on.